Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Kathy Ewing, Phase One Design. Welcome to our show, Going Custom. So, where we talk about everything to do with designing and building a custom home. So, before we get started today, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat during the show. If you're shy and don't want to do that, feel free to reach out directly either to myself or my colleague Nick, who I'll introduce in a second here. And lastly, if you have any topics you want us to talk about for future episodes, feel free to drop it in the chat, or again, just PMS if you are shy. So today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics and everyone's favorite topics, which is permitting timeframes, and specifically in Greater Vancouver, and Lower Mainland. I have with me today my very, very smart colleague, Nick Petrie. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Good. Yourself?
Good. I'm excited. This is a good topic.
Yeah, I love this.
On everyone's minds. Yeah. So what we're gonna do, we're just gonna dive right in and just start talking about it. So I guess first maybe what I'll do is just kind of give everyone a sneak peek of what we're actually going to be talking about in terms of the municipality. So what we'll do first is for all those that are already with us, we're going to talk about the actual time frame. So we're going to be talking about, we've narrowed it down to kind of like the 5 top cities that we see a lot of activity in, which is the city of Vancouver, city of Burnaby, city of North Vancouver, and then also the district of North Vancouver, and then also the district of West Vancouver. So we're going to be talking specifically about permit timeframes for these specific cities. If we don't address a city that you guys are interested in, again, feel free to drop questions in the chat or reach out to us directly afterwards, and we can certainly answer those questions. Now, everybody's favorite question is, how long does it take for my permit? But then, Nick, I think you can agree with me, the second conversation is always, okay, well, how do I make that go faster? Right?
Always.
Yeah. So today, and I feel like that question is even more important than the first question. So today we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be sharing tips with our viewers in terms of how can you make your permit timeframes go faster, specifically in Greater Vancouver. So why don't we start first with what the actual timeframes are? So maybe I'll just blast through, Nick, and you want to answer those questions?
Okay. Well, the first comment that I'm going to put in is it really depends on what you're applying for, because everything changes, right? If we start with the first one that we mentioned, which is City of Vancouver, are you doing a renovation permit? Great. Renovation permit, generally 3 or 4 months at the moment, sometimes 5 if you've got something really complicated, right? But are you doing a new build? That's 4 to 6 months, right? But then are you doing a complicated new build, complicated renovation? Does it require a development permit, in which case you've added on that time, right? So time for development permits is still 5 or 6 months. And then hopefully we're not talking about a rezoning or a variance or any of those things, because each one of those, a variance is 3 extra months as a minimum, and you don't know if you're going to get it. And you have to do the whole process for that. But anyway, so that's City of Vancouver. Going to Burnaby, it's generally 4 to 5
months. Nick, before we move on, maybe in the interest of our viewers that maybe are not as familiar with permitting processes. So in City of Vancouver, you talked about building permit and development permit. And so maybe we should just explain okay, so let's just say, generally speaking, most of the projects that we see, so let's just say you're designing something on, your typical lot.
Yeah.
Do you need a development permit and a building permit, or maybe let's talk about that?
Okay. So I'll break it down once again into the 2 categories: renovations versus new builds. So renovations, generally you don't need a development permit unless you are adding to the square footage in a significant manner. So I think it's about, I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule, but I think it's about 5 or 10% change in square footage. If you're adding height to the building, you're making a major addition onto the building, which would obviously add square footage, but it's also adding footprint and depth to the building. If it's an older home, and if you're asking for exemptions, relaxations, that kind of thing, that can also throw a development permit on it. So that's renovations, quick nutshell. Or if it's heritage, or actually the one This is most other cities, doesn't come up very often with Vancouver,
Mhm.
but environmental development permit if you happen to be near a stream, in a floodplain, that kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, so then on the new build side, most new builds these days don't require a development permit, but again, you're asking for anything special. You're going into character. You're going into you're asking for exemptions or relaxations that aren't in the standard outright rules. Then
Mhm.
going in for development permit, and again, if you have environmental, um, does that help explain that piece?
Okay, yeah, I think that's great. And I will say, just to kind of build upon what you said, Nick, I will say, like for our firm, anyways, when
Mhm.
we're working with a client, we actually strategize the design
Yeah,
and the project most of the time, where we are getting that quicker permit time frame, which is basically avoiding all those things that you just said, Nick. So basically, no development permit, and so you're just a building
yeah.
permit. Yeah. And so before we move on, let's just maybe emphasize again, what were those timeframes again, Nick? So with no development permit for renovation in
So
Vancouver.
development permit generally is 5 to 6 months, but can be a lot longer. And the reason I
No,
say
sorry, for a building permit.
oh, sorry, building permit. Sorry,
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about a development permit. Building permit is right now on average 3 to 4, maybe sometimes 5 for renovation, and 4 to 6 for a new build. At least this is what we've been seeing, right? Vancouver's actually gotten a lot better in
And
this
subject
last
to
year.
change, obviously, because we don't control
Oh
the
yeah.
time. Just for
Well, it also
education.
depends on how many planners are on vacation at that
Yeah,
point,
exactly.
right? So,
Lots of
um,
different
yeah, there's always
factors.
going to be hiccups, but and then the development permit side is 5 to 6 months, as I was saying, or
But
could be a
avoid.
lot longer
Yeah.
depending on how many different departments you're going through. So,
Awesome. Okay,
okay,
cool. Let's shift gears. So let's talk about City of Burnaby. So City of Burnaby just went through, a pretty large
yeah,
zoning change, which was actually great. So we're actually seeing a ton of projects and interest in doing new builds and projects
yeah,
in Burnaby. We're not going to deep dive into that. That's like
yeah,
another topic for another day. But let's talk about the permitting timeframes for the City of Burnaby.
yeah. The new zoning change actually is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
Almost if you're talking about what we call detached housing, so houses is what is generally classified as detached housing. So 1 to 6 units is what I'll classify it as.
Mhm.
Although really 1 to 4 is the general. You're looking at about 5 or 6 months for a building permit. There is no development permit unless you're in an environmental area or something that is completely out of the norm.
Yeah, which is weird.
Um,
Those are really rare circumstances.
yeah, in Burnaby they don't come up very often, which is great. Like
Mhm.
there are some streams, there are some environmental areas, but there aren't a ton of them, right?
Right.
And most of them are in pretty stable areas, so you don't have to worry about it.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
Burnaby's actually
we
pretty
love
sweet.
Burnaby. We totally
Yeah,
love Burnaby. And
yeah,
yes,
no, Burnaby's
I
great.
agree. The new zoning changes have just been incredible. So,
Yeah,
yeah, which again, if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out
yeah,
directly on that because we're not going to deep dive into that today. We should almost do another LinkedIn Live on that topic. Hey, Nick? Feel like
probably actually.
it's so such a popular topic. Okay,
Yeah,
cool. So that is Burnaby in a nutshell. And I guess just sharing a little snippet, a little tip, so there's the permitting time frame, but the sooner you start any project, the better.
yeah,
The advice I always like to give clients is at least like get your project started, do the design, do your permits, get it approved.
yeah,
And worst case scenario, you can just sit on that permit, and like
yeah,
control your construction start date. But
yeah,
at least you have that approved permit in your hand. That is like such a valuable thing to
yeah.
have in your hand. So you
It,
definitely don't want to delay doing it. And even like right now, so we're doing this live on December the 12th, 2024. We'll just
yeah,
timestamp this video. But what that means is that, as we all know, for the next month, most municipalities are going to be on holidays, as is the rest of the world. So you're going to lose like 1 month right out of the gate.
yeah. And that's a really important factor in there because you got to plan around those things. And like you were saying, you can sit on a permit for up to 2 years.
Yeah, that's it.
So
That's a good point.
now you do have to pay for every 6 months of extension,
Right.
but it's only a few $100s. Like I think
Yeah,
it's under
totally
400.
worth it. Totally
Yeah,
worth it. But then you can control your construction start date, right? So
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, and if it's like bad weather or like you just never know. Nobody can predict the weather, right? But
yeah. And
you
it's
can
better to have
control.
the permit in hand 3 months early and be able to say, okay, I'm going to start exactly on this date. I'm going to get everything in place and ready
Totally.
for it. And then you can just go rather than, oh my God, I want that permit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I need that permit next week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, the
100%.
city's taking 4 weeks to process it. There's nothing I can do, right? Like
I will
it's,
say, yeah,
yeah.
and like actually, for our viewers right now too, so Christmas is one factor, and then I will
Mhm.
also say like over the summer as well. Sometimes they're like your permit timeframes, depending on which planner you
Oh, yeah.
have, you can slow down based on
Oh,
summer
very
holidays.
much.
The other thing I was going to say too is, obviously permitting timeframes are like a consideration for your overall schedule. But, and we're not going to deep dive into this today because this is not the topic for today, but still very important to consider is like your design timeframe. So all the drawings that need to happen up until you actually submit for permits. I always like to say 4 to 6 months for that process. Ideally, like closer to 6, the better, just depending on the complexity of your project and lots of other different factors. But so call it you're probably like a year in planning even before you start construction easily, right?
Yeah, easily. Well,
depending on municipality, depending on
yeah,
lots of things.
municipality. I mean, it could be as little as 10 months, but yeah, it's around a year. And I always stress that point because like I have had a few come through in 9 or 10 months, but they're the exception, right? And unless it's like a small reno, that kind of thing, in which case maybe 7 or 8, but still, you know what I'm saying. So
totally. Okay, let's move on. So let's cross the bridge, and we're gonna talk about some North Shore municipalities that we work in and see like lots of activity in. So let's talk about City of North Vancouver first. So time frames. Nick, you want to go? You go.
City of North Van is usually pretty good. 3 to 5 months, I'd say, for most new builds and renos. Probably a little bit on the lower side for the renos. They're pretty straightforward. Development permits are only, once again, and this is why a bunch of this is kind of applies to everybody, is if you're asking for relaxations or that kind of thing, that's going to potentially throw you into a development permit scenario and having to go through the design review and so on and go through it at city council, which is not what you want because that's going to slow things down. But most stuff you can actually get through really easily with the City of North Van. It's actually pretty good.
Awesome. Yes, we love working with City of North Van. So as most of our viewers probably know, there is a difference between the City of North Vancouver and the District of North Vancouver. So let's talk about the district. How long are time frames there?
That depends. So the District of North Vancouver has some interesting challenges in that it has so even though the City of North Vancouver is nestled within the District of North Vancouver, the city has less environmental. The district has tons of streams, ravines, slopes, you name it, anything that could go wrong. So you have quite a few development permits in there. Now, I have seen permits go through in, as low as 2 months and upwards of 6 for the building permit side, but then it's how much environmental development permit you have. That's the most common is the environmental. I've done some heritage. I've done a bunch of other things in the district, and those ones you can usually get through in 6 to 8 months. Heritage always takes longer, just to be clear.
Just more reviews and things like that.
Yeah, you have to go through so many extra consultants when you're dealing with anything on the development permit side. So and there's a lot of them. Does that? Did I
for sure. And I think it might be really valuable for our viewers to talk about this right now too, because so much of what we do in our world and like in the custom world is like it depends on your project. So like for a homeowner, it can be challenging to know what that answer is. So really, it's very specific to the address and the project. So normally, to find that answer specifically, you could literally just reach out to us and within like one address review, very quickly we can tell you, based on what it is that you're looking for in your custom build, here are the types of permits that we could be needing to get. So the development permits that are going to add that extra time frame. And then we can also help advise in terms of like, any additional costs, like if you need environmental assessments or whatever. Now, I also want to touch on something where this extra time frame that is present for, development permits and variances on any project, if it's applicable.
Yeah.
There's two different things. Okay. So like sometimes we can control these factors and sometimes we cannot. So let me give you an example. So let's say West Vancouver. Oh, we haven't talked about West Vancouver yet, but okay, I'll use that as an example. If you're within a certain distance of a creek, that could trigger a development permit, right? So we can control where that creek is, obviously. So, but what we can control is if we were talking to clients early on enough when they're buying a lot and they come to us and they say, hey guys, can you check out my lot? And then we'll say, oh yeah, you know what? This lot's beautiful, but just FYI, there's a creek within X amount of meters. So because of that, you need a development permit. So like you can kind of control external factors like that. The other thing that would trigger a development permit or a variance, sometimes we can control. So for example, if we just design everything to by law, then, it should be a pretty straightforward permit. However, and we, to be honest, as a firm, we kind of discourage this because of the risk and the uncertainty and extra timeframes, blah, 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 that goes into variances. But if a client's like really, really, adamant that they want a certain design feature, and let's just say it's outside of bylaw compliance, then we're always happy to do a variance. It's called a variance. So variance to the bylaw. So we're always happy to do whatever the client directs us to do. However, understanding that, those are things that technically we can control and design, but then a client just chooses not to. Not to follow the bylaw and do the variance, and vice versa. We can choose also to design everything to bylaw, which is going to expedite the process. So I just thought I'd share that because some development permit triggers we don't control, and some of them we do.
Yeah, and I completely agree. There's a lot of projects where like, okay, we want the fastest permit options we can. And you're like, okay, then we're literally going to follow the letter of everything, go right through and keep it as clean as submission as possible.
For sure.
And those ones will go very fast. But then you're like, well, I want this extra, or whatever it is, the extra height or this. And like you said, you're either having to ask for relaxations if there's flexibility within the zoning, or you're going straight for a variance, which the problem with variance is, and I will say, the ones that I've been involved in, I would say more than half one, the variances, but I'm sure it's more than half. With one. But I want to explain, you actually have to do the full permit application, go through, pay everything, have all the consultants paid for, and all of their reports in your submission. The city will go, great, we cannot approve you because these things you've asked for are outside of our zoning allowances. So we have to reject you. And you're like, great, is there anything else? Nope, perfect. Then you get to apply to the Board of Variance, and then you pay them. And we normally do a full report and everything to them. And it takes an extra 2 to 3 months to then go through the Board of Variance. If you get rejected at the Board of Variance, like if you're approved, great, you have a permit. Like the way I just wanted to mention this because this is important for homeowners and people who haven't gone through variances before, is that great, you have your permit automatically, like it's issued within a week by the city. And then you can go to whatever the next stage is. So if it was a development permit that went through variance, then you can go to your building permit. If it was building permit, then you can go to construction. Right. But if you get rejected for whatever reason, then you have to review why you were rejected and decide if you want to revise your design or not, right? And then that can add more time. I want to mention it because it can work, but it's also it's a gamble, right? As to what's going to happen.
There's no right or wrong answer, like I always, two sides to the coin. So yes, definitely it can take longer in some cases to get like development permits and variances, things like that. However, if you are designing your forever dream home and like there's something you really want, sometimes it does make sense just to add that extra whatever it is that you want. And then just as long as you understand the risks and you understand the additional time frame and then any potential additional cost, if that applies. And again, every scenario is different. And just FYI, like for homeowner clients, you don't need to assess this on your own. This is something your design team helping you assess because it's very complicated. So, all right. So we should go back to our agenda. So, District of West Vancouver. Let's talk about West Vancouver. How long does it take for permits there?
Well, and that depends. So building permits
It's our favorite answer.
yeah, no. Well, West Vancouver, it really depends because
Mhm.
right now they have a backlog, and it's generally 3 to 5 weeks before they can even take a look at your submission to let you know
Mhm.
what channel you're going to be going through. But in general, there's still 3 to 5 months for building permits, but
Mhm.
development permits, I've seen as quick as I want to say 2 or 3 months, but I think it was really 3 or 4. And at the same time, I've seen it go up to 8 or 9, just depending on how many departments. Once again, because a development permit, all of a sudden you're going through engineering, you're going
Yeah.
through landscaping, you're going through heritage, you're going through all these different departments that
Yeah.
all have an opinion on your project, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. I will also say, and Nick, I mean, feel free to add what you'd like, but I would
Mhm.
say to, again, very generally speaking, if you are developing on the North Shore, there is more, there's more, not risk, that's not the proper way of saying it. There's more opportunity for like having to do a development permit just because there
Oh, yeah.
are more like environmental things just by
Oh, yeah.
nature of, the North Shore. Obviously there's more trees, there's more
Yeah.
creeks and, things like that. And again, not to discourage anyone from doing a project
No, they're
or
gorgeous.
not like purchasing a site with these environmental factors. It's just, you just need to build this extra time into
Yeah.
your project schedule at the
Yeah.
beginning.
One of the things in the North Shore in general is that, because you're mentioning the trees, and people may have to realize it's technically a wildfire zone on
Mhm.
the North Shore because you have so much forest,
Right.
which is not a bad thing. It's great.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, it's
again
beautiful.
fresh air, clean
That's why
shade,
you're in the
all
North
these good things.
Shore.
Yeah.
Totally.
And but you're sitting on the North Shore. You've got the most amazing view ever. We just have to
Mhm.
design your house so that it meets all of those requirements, and that's why there's a very good chance that you'll end up
Mhm.
with some kind of environmental
For sure.
yeah. So, anyways, just my 2 bits
Yeah.
on that because I've seen a few of them. So,
Yeah. All right. Great. So those are a few municipalities that we'll share. Oh, there was another one we're going to talk about, Nick. We're going to talk
oh
about Port
yeah,
Moody, Ambleside, like just that
yeah,
area.
yeah, yeah. Port Moody is actually a really interesting city. It's got a lot of development going on
Mhm.
these days. Like there's a bunch of towers being built, and it doesn't matter. There's tons going on. They're usually on the slightly faster side for
Mhm.
building permits. They're usually
We
about
love
3 to 4 months.
Port Moody.
Yeah, Port
Mhm.
Moody is a lot of fun. It also
Yeah,
has
we have
great
lots
views.
of projects there.
Yeah, yeah. You got all the sheltered, the bay area
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
off of Ioko and all that hillside.
Mhm.
It's beautiful views and
Mhm.
a lot of heritage and so on. So, anyways, back to that. So, 3 to 4 months is usually what I've been seeing for building permits in Port Moody. Development permits, you have some environmental, not as bad overall, but there is some, which can add. It's not as bad. I would say it's probably only 3 or 6 months that you're adding on your
Mhm.
development permit side.
Yeah.
But there are a section that is heritage. So if you go to renovate heritage, expect an extra 3 to 6 months because
Mhm.
heritage always has a lot of extra hurdles that you have to jump through. And
Yeah.
I've done those. So yeah.
Mhm. Awesome.
Um, yeah.
So maybe
And,
we can. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
no. I was just going to say, like, related to that, there's uh, Anmore, which is right next door to Port Moody, and then Belcara, which is just a little bit further over.
Mhm. Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
and they're usually in about the same time frames as Port Moody, sometimes a little bit longer because there'll be some design criteria you have to jump through. But yeah, sorry, I'm digressing. You were going to
Yeah.
ask a question.
No, I
So,
was gonna say we have about 5 minutes left. I think maybe to
okay.
wrap up, we can share some tips with our viewers in terms of like how do you make your permits go faster? So like I have a list of about a few items here. Do you want me to
Yeah,
go first?
yeah, sure. We can alternate, or yeah.
Yeah, we can tag team this. So I would say that for me, like just I've been doing this for like almost 20 years. So I've seen a lot of permits going through.
Yeah.
But I will say it's the thoroughness and the quality of your permit submission is a huge, huge one.
Yeah.
And I'll explain what I mean by that. if you talk to any city planner, they will tell you, because they see so many different applications, there is a very, very obvious like variety of quality of submissions that they see, because they see them coming from all these different applicants, design firms, things like that. So, and what I mean by that is, to be specific, is the quality of the drawings. So like, do the drawings even meet the criteria? Like, so most municipalities, actually, I'm pretty sure all municipalities have a very specific checklist that is a publicly accessed document that's online. Everybody has access to that. So like really basic stuff like following that checklist. Do those drawings follow that checklist or not? The second thing is, I would say pretty confidently, every single municipality also has another checklist that isn't necessarily online. It's not online. It's literally just based off of the experience of the firm. Where, we know going into certain municipalities that there's certain items that those planners in that municipality want. So instead of waiting for them to ask for it, we just put them on the drawings initially. Because when the planner's going through them and doing their review, here's what happens. They take in the drawings, they do the review, and then they're going to issue a deficiency list. Then they send it back to the firm. The firm updates the drawings, and then the planner reviews it again. So that whole cycle, you want as little of them as possible, and you want as few things on that deficiency list as possible. And the only way to do that is through experience, like working with a team that's experienced in the requirements, and not just your design team. It's like the design consultant. So for example, like the energy advisor, the arborist, like if that's a requirement, like all these consultants that actually know what the city's looking for. All these things don't seem like they're that important, but they are actually critically important. Because I'll give an extreme example. There was a project we actually got brought on to. We took over it from another team, but what happened there when we took over it, there was a consultant that was, let's just say, less experienced in that municipality. And I'm not even exaggerating. I remember reading the history of this file, and there was 11 iterations of, comments from this municipality. And I was just shocked. And it was just like really silly things, like labels for trees were not done properly. And then I looked at them. I'm like, oh, I know that's really obvious, right? But just things like that. So I would say that's the biggest thing. Hey, Nick?
Oh yeah, no, I agreed. And there's hundreds of things. They're told, you have to calculate your knee height on your roof, and you have to give us all that information. And then you see comments back from I'm thinking also of projects that we've taken over from others, and you're seeing the comments, and they're like, no, I don't have to. I'm like, the city told you they want that on the drawings. Just put it on the drawings. Why waste 2 weeks arguing when just make sure that it's there in the first place?
Oh, that's a really good point too, Nick. We should bring up. So when you get that deficiency list back, it's the experience again of the team that's dealing with that file. So some things you say, you know what? Okay, you're right. We missed it. Or okay, sure, we can just do that because it's easy. And then surprisingly though, some things you can go back and be like, no, we don't agree with that. And then you can negotiate. But you have to know which battles to pick,
Exactly.
Because some conversations are worth having, and some things you just know there's no way that municipality is going to relax that. So it's not even worth wasting your time. And I will also say, we love our friends at municipalities, but a lot of municipalities are very busy, and they are overloaded with work. So you want to make this process as easy for them and as fast for them. So if you're asking them silly questions, there's sometimes there's a reason why it takes 2 weeks to get an email back, because it's almost like they're getting frustrated with all the questions, right?
Yeah, or they've got 15 other projects that they're also trying to review at the same time.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'm getting through. Okay, here's your answer really quick. And you're like, great, thanks. And it's back in our court, and we get out back to them as fast as possible, right? And you keep trying to play with them and communicate as effectively as you can, even if it takes a few extra hours. You have to do up some extra drawings just to communicate, hey, this is exactly what's happening here. Yeah, you do it, right? But like you said, it's knowing when is the right battle. Anyways.
For sure. Amazing. Oh my God, look at it. It's time. So that's our 30 minutes. Wow, these go by so fast. So first of all, I want to thank you to all of our viewers that are joining us today. Our viewership's going up and up every time we do these. So thanks so much for joining us. Nick, thank you for all your expertise. It's always fun doing these with you. And make sure you like, comment, follow us. We're here every week on a weekly basis. Next week, we're going to be doing a live show to do with our Calgary project. We're going to be talking about the blanket rezoning and the future of blanket rezoning in Calgary. Ooh, like super controversial topic, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So yeah, we'll hope to see all of our viewers next week. And if you liked our content today, don't forget to tell all your friends, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.
Yep. Bye. We'll talk to you soon.